Welcome back to another story. Don't forget to drop a like or a 5-star rating if you are on Spotify. Let's begin. I've worked nights my whole adult life, so let me tell you, there's a specific kind of quiet that belongs only to 3 in the morning on Colfax Avenue. Not peaceful quiet, not the kind you'd choose. It's more like the city exhaled and forgot to breathe back in, and you're standing there under bright lights watching it happen. I'd been at the Walgreens on Colfax for 3 years by that November. Same overnight shift, Sunday through Thursday, 10 at night to 6 in the morning. I was 26. I want to say that plainly, without making it sound worse than it was. 26 is young, I know that. But somewhere around my second year at Community College of Denver, I just kind of stopped. Stopped registering, stopped planning, stopped asking what came next. I told myself I'd go back. I told myself a lot of things. The overnight shift at Walgreens was supposed to be temporary, the way a lot of things are supposed to be temporary, and then one day, you're mopping the pharmacy aisle at 4:15 in the morning, and you realize you've been there longer than some of your coworkers have been legal adults. Willie had opinions about this. My roommate, Willie Bishop, nursing student at Anschutz, perpetually in scrubs, perpetually with a study guide open somewhere in our apartment. He'd look at me sometimes with this expression like he was calculating something and didn't like the answer. He wasn't mean about it. Willie was never mean about anything. He'd just say things like, "The drift ends eventually, man," while he poured himself coffee before a clinical rotation, like he was stating a medical fact. Like drifting was a condition with a documented recovery rate. I appreciated it. I just didn't believe him. The Tuesday it happened was cold in that specific Denver way, dry and sharp. Colfax was quiet even by its own standards. I'd processed maybe a dozen transactions in 4 hours. Around 2:45, a customer came in. I didn't look up right away. I was straightening the display rack near the register, and I heard the door and I registered footsteps, and I finished what I was doing. By the time I looked up, the customer was already at the counter. He was older, maybe late 50s, gray at the temples, wearing a jacket that looked too thin for the weather. He was holding a box, shoebox-sized, brown, the kind that gets soft and rounded at the corners when water gets to it. He set it on the counter without saying anything, and he slid it toward me. I looked at him, he looked at me, or I thought he was looking at me. He had his head down a little. "What's this?" I said. He didn't answer. I looked down at the box. When I looked back up, he was gone. Gone. The door wasn't swinging. I hadn't heard footsteps. I'd looked away for maybe 2 seconds. I leaned over the counter and checked the aisle nearest the door, and there was nobody. I went to the door and pushed it open and stood in the cold, looking up and down Colfax in both directions. Nothing, just the street, longer than needed to. The cold got into my collar. Eventually I went back inside. The box was still on the counter. I pulled it open. Inside, cushioned in a crumple of newspaper, was a Game Boy Advance cartridge. No case, no label on the cartridge itself, just a strip of white sticker tape with handwriting on it in black marker. Small letters, neat. Like someone had taken their time. The handwriting said, "Find her before dawn." I read it twice. Then I turned the cartridge over, checked the back, checked inside the box again. Newspaper. A Game Boy cartridge. That's it. My first thought, honestly, was that it was somebody's idea of a bit. We got strange stuff left at the counter sometimes. Notes, drawings, once a laminated prayer card with someone's phone number written on the back. Colfax attracted a specific kind of person at 3 in the morning, and not all of them were operating on the same frequency as everyone else. I'd learned not to read too much into it. I set the cartridge on the counter, looked at the door again. The store was completely empty. I picked the cartridge back up, turned it over once more, and put it in my jacket pocket. I told myself I'd throw it away before I clocked out. I had a whole shift left. I forgot about it. I didn't throw it away. I'm not sure why. I emptied my pockets when I got home at 6:30, and there it was, and I just set it on my dresser and went to sleep. Willie's door was closed. His shoes lined up outside it the way he always did before an early clinical. He had to be at the hospital by 7. I heard him leave while I was still half awake, heard the front door, heard the deadbolt click. Then it was quiet. I slept until almost 3 in the afternoon, ate cereal standing over the sink, watched 40 minutes of something on my laptop without really watching it. The cartridge sat on my dresser, and I kept not throwing it away, which I noticed but didn't examine too closely. Willie got home around 8 that evening, still in his scrubs, and we ate leftover rice and talked about nothing in particular. He asked how the shift was. I said slow. He told me about a patient who'd called him by the wrong name all day, and how he'd just let it happen because correcting people mid-crisis felt cruel. I laughed. He went to bed by 10 because he always went to bed by 10 during clinical rotations, like his body had been reprogrammed. I sat on the couch for a while after that. The apartment got that specific late-night stillness, where you can hear the refrigerator from the living room. I went to my room, looked at the cartridge. I still had my old Game Boy Advance. I want to say that's not embarrassing, but I'm not sure I believe that. It was in a shoebox in my closet, underneath a sweatshirt I never wore, and a tangle of old charger cables that didn't match anything I currently owned. The Game Boy was burgundy, a little scuffed on the back corner, but the screen still worked and the battery cover still clicked into place. I'd played it exactly once in the past 2 years, on a slow overnight shift when I'd brought it in for something to do. I sat on the edge of my bed with it in my hands for a second. The cartridge had no label, just that strip of tape. Find her before dawn. I pushed it into the slot. It clicked. I turned the power on. The screen lit up gray, then settled. No title screen, no start menu, just a pixelated street that loaded in from left to right, building by building, like the game was drawing itself in real time. And I sat up straighter. I knew that street. I knew it immediately, the way you know something you've looked at so many times it stopped being scenery and started being part of your peripheral vision. The rendered storefronts, the wide lane markers, the specific angle of the corner where the bus shelter sat, even in 16-bit graphics, even with everything flattened into blocks of color, it was Colfax. It was my block of Colfax. A pixelated figure stood on the sidewalk in front of a building I was pretty sure was my Walgreens. Small, maybe 12 pixels tall, wearing a red coat, just standing there, not moving. Text appeared at the bottom of the screen. White letters, black box behind them. No sound, just the words sitting there. She went missing from this block. 14 months ago. You were working that night. You saw something. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the A button. I didn't press it. 14 months ago. I ran the math automatically that put it around September of last year. I thought about that period, tried to pull something up, anything. A face, an incident, something that had stuck with me from a shift. The kind of thing you'd remember. The kind of thing you wouldn't forget if you'd actually seen it. I got nothing. The figure in the red coat stood motionless on the screen. The text waited. I finally pressed the A button, and that's the thing I keep coming back to. I didn't have to. I was sitting on the edge of my bed at whatever time it was. Past midnight, Willie already gone quiet on the other side of the wall, and I could have just pulled the cartridge out, dropped it in the trash, and gone to sleep. I almost did. But I pressed it anyway. The text cleared. The pixelated street stayed up, still rendering, and then a new line appeared at the bottom of the screen in that same blocky white font. Hello, Edward. I stared at that for a second. Edward, not Eddie, not the name on my Walgreens badge which just says Eddie because that's what I told HR, and that's what I've gone by my entire life. Edward is what's on my birth certificate and my driver's license and approximately nothing else. I hadn't typed anything. There was no keyboard. There was no setup screen, no account creation, no permission prompt. The game just knew. I turned the cartridge over again like that would tell me something. I flipped it back and looked at the screen. The pixelated woman in the red coat had started moving, not walking exactly, more like she was being placed, frame by frame, into different locations. The screen would cut to a new street, a new angle, and she'd be standing there. I recognized the King Supers on Leetsdale. The entrance, the cart return, the specific way the parking lot light falls at the far corner. I've made midnight runs there for cereal and energy drinks enough times that my brain just knew it. Then she was at the bus stop directly outside my store, standing with her back to the rendered Walgreens sign. Then in an alley I had to think about for a second. Narrow, brick on both sides, a dumpster positioned wrong. Before I placed it as the alley behind the old Satire Lounge, couple blocks east. These weren't generic city graphics. Somebody had mapped them. The text appeared again. You were there. Navigate to the first memory. A small blinking cursor showed up on screen, positioned over the bus stop location. The D-pad moved it. I don't know why I just accepted that and kept going, but I did. I pressed A on the bus stop. The screen went dark for half a second, and then it wasn't a game anymore. Or it was still a game, but it was showing me something else. A scene. Rendered in the same 16-bit style, but with a text box running underneath it. And the text box was... It was a night I remembered, or started to remember, the way you remember something once someone mentions it. There was a customer at the pharmacy counter. I could see him in the graphic, gesturing, and I could see a rendered version of me behind the register, and the text box read out the argument almost verbatim. He's saying the insurance won't cover it. You're saying you can't override it. He's been here 11 minutes. There was a car in the rendered parking lot, engine running, headlights on, just sitting there. I remembered that too, vaguely, thinking it was weird, someone just idling, then forgetting about it because the pharmacy guy was still going. And then the woman walked in, red coat, dark hair. She came straight to the front counter, not the pharmacy, and she asked me something. The text box filled in. My phone died. Can I use your store phone? And I remembered her. I remembered her completely and suddenly, not gradually, not in pieces, but all at once, like a door opening. She was calm about it, polite. I handed her the receiver and went back to pretending to restock something nearby while she made her call. She stood there for a bit, near the front window, arms crossed, watching the parking lot. I assumed she was waiting for a ride. I didn't ask. Eventually I looked up and she was gone, and I didn't think about it again. Not once. Not in 14 months. The game moved to the next screen before I was ready. Police report. Scanned, not rendered. An actual document image embedded in the game somehow, with an actual case number printed in the header. Then a photograph. Then another. Missing persons. Denver Police Department. The photograph was her. The woman from my store, from my memory, from 20 minutes of her standing at my front window watching the parking lot for a ride that I never saw arrive. I sat there with the Game Boy in my hands, and I didn't move for a while. Then I picked up my phone. It was 3 in the morning. I typed the name from the report into the search bar, Ellie Bravo Denver missing, and the results came up fast. News articles, a Facebook post with a share count in the hundreds, a Denver 7 segment from last October. 31 years old, last confirmed location, the 2200 block of East Colfax Avenue. Previous September, that is my block. My store, she had used my phone. The game gave me the locker number and combination in the same flat white text it had used for everything else. Locker 117, 22, 7, 35. Denver Union Station, lower level. I read it twice. Then I sat there for a minute just holding the Game Boy, staring at those numbers, like they might change. They didn't. I told myself I wasn't going. I mean, it was past 3 in the morning. I had work in less than 24 hours, and I was already in way over my head with a missing persons case I'd accidentally stumbled into through a video game cartridge left by a man who disappeared in front of a security camera. Going to Union Station alone at 4 a.m. felt like the part of the story where everyone watching would be yelling at the screen. I grabbed my keys off the dresser anyway. The drive was maybe 15 minutes. Colfax to Spear, then down toward the station. Denver is a different city at that hour, not empty exactly, but hollowed out, like someone turned the volume all the way down. I passed a couple of delivery trucks, a guy on a bike with a blinking red light, one cop car sitting in a lot facing the street, kept the radio off. I parked on Wynkoop and sat in the car for a bit, telling myself I was just going to drive back home. Then I got out and walked toward the station. The main hall was open. Union Station stays open overnight, which I'd forgotten. A few people were scattered across the benches inside, bags piled around them. That specific kind of stillness you get from people who've been waiting a long time and stopped expecting anything. The overhead lights were on full, but the space felt dim anyway. All that vaulted ceiling swallowing the light before it reached the floor, I found the lower-level lockers without much trouble. 117 was in the second row from the bottom, about knee height. I crouched down in front of it and worked the combination. My hands weren't shaking. I noticed that, actually. I kept waiting for them to shake, and they just didn't. I don't know if that's composure or just shock that hadn't finished processing yet. The latch clicked. Inside was a manila envelope, standard letter size, sealed with a metal clasp. No label, no writing on the outside. I opened it right there in the crouch, back against the lockers, and slid the contents out. Photographs. Printed on regular paper, not photo stock, the kind you get from a home printer. 8 of them, slightly warm to the touch from being sealed in the envelope. The images were grainy. ATM footage, the timestamp burned into the lower right corner of each one, that specific washed-out quality you get from outdoor cameras at night. I recognized the angle immediately. That ATM sits directly across from my Walgreens, angled toward the parking lot. I walk past it every single shift. The photographs showed a blue sedan, parked in the same spot across 3 separate images, engine presumably running. You could see the faint exhaust haze in the background of one shot. The driver was visible as a shape behind the wheel, not clear enough to make out features, just a silhouette. Male, probably, shoulders that read as male. The partial plate was visible in 2 of the photos, a letter, a number, then a partial third character before the angle cut off. The timestamps were from September, 14 months ago, starting around 11:45 p.m. and running through to just past 1 a.m. I shuffled through the photos twice. Then I sat down fully on the floor, back against the lockers, and just held them in both hands. Whoever built that game had been doing this for months, maybe longer. They'd pulled the ATM footage, printed it, sealed it, and stored it here, waiting. They knew the case number. They had Ellie's police report. They knew my name, my legal name, not the one on my badge, not the one anyone calls me. They knew I'd been there that night, and they couldn't go to the police themselves, or they would have already. Something was stopping them. Maybe they'd been too close to the situation. Maybe they'd seen something they couldn't explain being in the right place to see. Maybe whoever was driving that blue sedan was someone who would know if they walked into a police station. So they found me instead. I put the photos back in the envelope, tucked it under my arm, and drove home. Willie's door was still closed when I got in, the thin strip under it dark. I stood in the hallway for a second, just breathing. Then I knocked. Willie. Nothing. Willie, I need you to wake up. A pause. Then the sound of him rolling over, a groggy exhale. Eddie, I know what time it is. He came out in his sweatpants, hair sideways, squinting. I brought him to the kitchen table and laid everything out. The Game Boy, the cartridge, the envelope, and its photographs. I walked him through it start to finish, the man at the counter, the text on the screen, Ellie Bravo, the news articles, and then the locker, and then the photos. He didn't interrupt. He just sat there with his arms crossed and his jaw getting progressively tighter. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Call the police, he said, right now, and delete whatever's on that game. I know. Eddie, right now. I know I'm going to. I picked up my phone. Found the non-emergency number I'd already looked up on the drive home. Started dialing. That's when I heard the front door handle move. Not turn, move. That specific sound of pressure being applied from the other side. Testing. The deadbolt held. I looked at Willie. He was already standing, already looking at the door, and the expression on his face told me he'd heard it too and wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Silence. Then the handle moved again. Slow. I killed the lights first. I don't know why that was the instinct. Some part of my brain just decided that if whoever was outside could see light under the door, they'd know we were awake, and knowing we were awake changed something about the situation that I didn't want changed. So I hit the switch, grabbed Willie's arm in the dark, and pulled him toward the bathroom without saying anything. Willie didn't argue. That's the thing about Willie. He reads a room fast. Nursing school does that to you, I think. You learn pretty quickly which situations require questions and which ones just require you to move. We got into the bathroom. I pulled the door most of the way shut, left it cracked about an inch. I could still see a thin strip of the kitchen table from there. The Game Boy, the envelope, the photographs fanned out where I'd left them, and beyond that, the front door. The handle didn't move again. I dialed 911. The dispatcher, a woman, calm in a way that felt practiced rather than natural, picked up immediately. I gave her the address. I told her someone was trying to get into my apartment. She told me to stay on the line, and that units were on their way. She stayed with me. I could hear her breathing, steady and even, and I focused on that because my own breathing was doing something I didn't have a lot of control over. Willie was standing with his back against the wall beside the toilet. His arms were crossed. He was staring at the gap in the door. Neither of us spoke. 4 minutes. That's how long it took. I heard them in the hallway before the dispatcher confirmed they'd arrived. Boots on hardwood, the clipped radio static. Someone saying "clear" in a voice that didn't need to be loud to carry. I told the dispatcher I could hear officers. She told me to stay put until someone knocked and identified themselves. I did. They found nothing. The hallway was empty. No one on the stairwell landing, no one in the lobby, no one on the street who matched anything I could give them as a description. The officers came inside, looked at the door frame, noted the lock held. One of them, a younger guy with a thin beard who looked about my age, told me the handle mechanism didn't show signs of tampering. He said it like that was good news. It didn't feel like good news. The stairwell camera footage came later. A week later, maybe a little more. Detective Laura Silva was the one who told me about it. The building manager had pulled it after the officer's report flagged the address, and Silva had gotten her hands on it through the Bravo case connection. A man in a gray jacket, standing at my door for 11 minutes. 11. I keep coming back to that number because it's specific in a way that's hard to sit with. That's not someone who knocked and left. That's not someone who had the wrong apartment. That's someone who stood there in a building hallway at past 3 in the morning for 11 minutes and never knocked. I don't know what he was waiting for. I've thought about it a lot and I still don't know. Silva came to the apartment 2 days after the 911 call. She called first, gave me her name and rank and case number, and asked if she could come by. I said yes. I don't think I would have said no, regardless of what she'd asked at that point. I was past the part of this where I had the luxury of deciding how involved I wanted to be. She was direct. That's the first thing I noticed about her. She came in, sat at the kitchen table where the photographs were still spread out, and looked at each one without touching them. She had a small scar on her left eyebrow, a pale thin line that caught the overhead light when she tilted her head. She'd been working the Bravo case for over a year, she told me. 14 months of it. She looked at the ATM photographs for a long time. Then she said they were evidentiary. Just like that. Matter of fact, the way you'd confirm an appointment. She didn't ask me how I'd gotten them. I'd been bracing for that question. Honestly, I had no idea how to explain a Game Boy cartridge left by a man who'd vanished in under 2 seconds. But she never asked. She just moved forward. I respected that more than I can really explain. What she did ask was whether I could identify the man in the blue sedan from that night, from September, 14 months ago. And here's the thing, I could. I hadn't known that until the game walked me back through it. The argument at the pharmacy counter, the 11 minutes, the woman in the red coat standing at the window with her arms crossed. But somewhere in the middle of that pixelated reconstruction, something in my memory had shifted loose. Because I'd looked up from the register at some point that night. I'd looked out through the front window at the parking lot, and I'd seen a man sitting in a blue sedan with the engine running, and I'd thought nothing of it. And I'd looked back down. I told Silva what I remembered. She wrote it down. The partial plate from the photographs, 1 letter, 1 number, 1 partial character, matched a vehicle registered to a man who'd been a person of interest in 2 other disappearances along the Colfax corridor. 2 other women, 2 cases that had gone nowhere because there was never enough to charge him. There was enough now. They found Ellie 6 weeks later. A drainage easement near the South Platte, about 4 miles from the block where she'd stood at my window watching the parking lot. I read about it on my phone during a slow stretch at work, standing behind the counter at 2 in the morning with the fluorescent hum overhead and the smell of toner and floor cleaner around me. The same counter where she'd asked to use the phone. The man in the gray jacket, the same gray jacket from my building's stairwell camera, the same blue sedan, the same partial plate, was arrested in January. I didn't feel relieved. I don't think relief is quite the right word for what it was. It was more like something that had been pressing against the inside of my chest for 6 weeks finally stopped pressing. Just stopped. And what was left underneath it wasn't exactly better, just quieter. I thought about her standing at that window, arms crossed, watching the parking lot. She knew. I think she knew, and she called someone anyway. And whoever she called didn't come. And then she left because she thought she could make it, or because she didn't have another option, or because she was the kind of person who didn't want to impose. I handed her the phone. I pretended to restock the shelf so she'd have privacy. I should have asked if she was okay. I know that doesn't change anything. I know that, but I think about it anyway. The hearing was in March. A Thursday, I think. Gray outside. That specific Denver gray where the mountains disappear behind cloud cover and the city looks flat and kind of provisional, like someone forgot to finish it. I wore the only button-down shirt I owned that didn't have a Walgreens logo on it. Willie ironed it for me the night before without me asking him to. I don't know what I expected the courtroom to feel like. Something from television, probably. But it was just a room. Fluorescent lights. It's that specific government building smell of old carpet and central heat running too high. The prosecutor walked me through everything. The phone, the window, the blue sedan, what I remembered and what the game had surfaced. I kept my hands flat on the witness stand because I'd read somewhere that was what you were supposed to do. I don't know if it helped. I just didn't want to fidget in front of a room full of people. He was sitting maybe 20 feet away from me the whole time. I didn't look at him directly. I tried once. And then I looked at the wall behind the prosecutor's table instead, and that's where I kept my eyes for the rest of it. I got the call from my manager. 4 days later. She said she was sorry. I actually believe she was, a little. She'd been decent to me the 3 years I worked there, covered shifts when I needed them, never made the overnight feel like punishment. But she said the district manager had concerns, that having an employee named in an active homicide case created liability she wasn't positioned to defend, and that she hoped I understood. I said I understood. I didn't argue. I don't really argue. I went back for my last shift anyway, because there was no reason not to, and I needed the hours. Stocked the vitamin aisle at 2 in the morning, wiped down the pharmacy counter, made a pot of coffee in the break room that nobody drank. The overnight quiet felt different knowing it was the last one. Or maybe it felt exactly the same and I was just paying more attention. I clocked out at 6, turned in my badge at the manager's station, and walked out onto Colfax while it was still dark. Sleep got bad after that. Not nightmare bad, nothing that dramatic, just shallow, interrupted. That thing where you wake up at 4 in the morning with your heart going a little too fast and no specific reason for it. I'd lie there and listen to Willie's alarm go off through the wall, hear him moving around in the kitchen, and eventually get up and sit on the couch with bad television on low volume until my body decided it was done pretending to rest. This went on for months, longer than I like to admit. I applied for jobs, grocery chain, 2 gas stations, a hotel front desk position that would have been overnight work again, which I took as proof I wasn't learning anything. I got the hotel job. It was quieter than Walgreens, different clientele, fewer people buying cold medicine at 3 in the morning and wanting to tell me why. I kept to myself, learned the booking system in about a week. It was fine. Silva called me in June, 4 or 5 months after the arrest. Just a follow-up, she said, tying off loose ends on her end. She told me the locker at Union Station had been rented in cash, no ID on file. No surveillance angle that caught a usable face, just a gray sleeve on a corner of the footage which told us exactly nothing we didn't already know. The name on the rental form was Thomas Garrett. She'd run it, no match to any real person connected to the case, the station, the neighborhood, a clean invented name with a plausible sound to it. So whoever it was, I said, just disappears. Whoever it was, she said, wanted it that way. I sat with that for a minute. She let me. The cartridge was the same story. She told me the department's tech unit had looked it over after I handed it in. I'd almost forgotten I'd given it to them during her first visit. It had been sitting in an evidence bag on the table next to the photographs by the time she left. No manufacturer markings, no traceable components. Whoever built it knew enough to strip out anything that could be followed backward. She said the tech who examined it called it a custom build, competent work, and that was about as far as the description went. I asked if they were still trying to identify it. She said the case was moving forward without it needing to be solved. She didn't say that to be dismissive. I understood what she meant. The cartridge had done what it was supposed to do. It didn't need an origin story to be useful. They returned it to me eventually, when the evidentiary process reached whatever point meant I could have it back. I put it in the shoebox with the Game Boy, the same burgundy one, still scuffed on the back corner, still functional, closed the lid, slid it back onto the shelf in my closet under the same never-worn sweatshirt. Some nights I'd take it out. I don't know why exactly. I'd sit on the edge of the bed, click the cartridge in, power the device on. The screen would light up that familiar green-gray, and then nothing, just a dark screen. No pixelated street, no figure in a red coat, no white text on black background asking me to navigate anywhere. Whatever it had needed to show me, it had already shown me. I'd sit there for a few minutes anyway. Then I'd power it off, put it back in the box, and go to sleep. And there you have it, folks. This one doesn't wrap itself up neatly. And that's the point. The supernatural mystery dissolves into something worse. A real girl, a real window, a real moment where asking, "Are you okay?" might have mattered. That guilt, sitting quietly beneath the resolution, is what makes this story stick. Sometimes the horror isn't just what you can't explain. It is about what you understood all along, and just didn't examine too closely.